My steering wheel came off in my hands. I've loved cars for literally as long as I can remember, and from the moment I could get my licence, I was on the road. And since then I've bought over 28 cars, and I can honestly say I've made pretty much every mistake possible. Whether it's buying cheap cars that have died before getting home, to ones that have tried to kill me by dismantling themselves on the way, if it can go wrong, it has. But I've also owned some fantastic cars, and today I'm revealing the 3 worst and the 3 best so far. If you're after a cheap used car, you need to hear this. Let's start with the disasters. Number 3, my Vauxhall Frontera. Now this is not it. That car was so short-lived I never even took a photo of it. I needed a car and I needed it fast, and for £500 this was it. The Frontera was my first 4x4 and it was utterly crap. When I went to view the car, the dealer proudly told me this is the cheapest Vauxhall Frontera in the UK, and I didn't see a single red flag there. The car later turned out to be a Cat D write-off, which in itself wouldn't normally bother me if I'd been told, but better still, this thing was actively falling apart. It was around 2 weeks later and I was parking up at work. The car itself was dreary and groany and I hated it. I got out, I slammed the door and bang! The exhaust had fallen off and the driver's window had disappeared down into the door all at once. Same slam. This thing just didn't want to stay in one piece. Now I didn't like the car anyway, so without looking back I went into work, and by the end of my shift I'd already arranged to buy back my best bargain car, which is number 1 in this video, and I offloaded the Frontera at a local farm. Now it actually turns out I don't have a lot of luck with Vauxhalls because number 2 didn't even make it a week. Yet another £500 shed, the Vauxhall Vectra SRI in black. This one was an eBay find. My dad drove me to collect it from an industrial estate in the middle of nowhere, and I was excited. But that I'm getting a new car excitement is pretty much always my downfall. So I showed up and immediately noticed that next to my car was another virtually identical SRI looking way fresher. Now should this have rung alarm bells? Could my new car have been a parts car for that one? Nope, didn't cross my mind. I parted with my cash and made my way home. A few days later, driving down some country roads near my house and bang, car dead and me skidding into a hedge. I composed myself, turned the key and ping, click, the engine is seized. I decided that day I hate Vauxhalls. A friend kindly dragged the car home with me in it, where it rotted on the drive until a scrap man came to take it away. I got myself another £500 car at that point, an E39 BMW, and in comparison, that was perfect. And after 2 Vauxhall cock-ups, I decided that was the last one I'd ever own. But those 2 cars don't even come close to being the worst car I've owned. The next one was such a calamity of issues that I had to give it the top spot. In at number 1 is a Toyota MR2 Asbo edition. You guessed it, another £500 banger straight out of the local classifieds. But this one has something special. Pop-up lights. And I told myself I would be sensible this time, and I brought a mate with me in those cars. And on the way there he told me in no uncertain terms, do not agree to buy this car until I've checked it over. And of course I agreed. Now the car itself was incredible. Bear in mind, I'd found it in a newspaper, so I had no idea what it looked like other than red. It had the worst stickers I've ever seen all over the car. You know, classy stuff like don't hate, appreciate, and don't laugh, your daughter may be inside. It had a broken, shocking looking body kit, an 8-ball gear knob and an exhaust big enough to house a small child. It was super loud, it had the T-bar roof, a rip-speed steering wheel. The teenager in me was begging me to buy this car. And before the test drive was over, and much to my friend's annoyance, I'd agreed to buy this attention-seeking missile. In honesty, we were actually underneath it doing our first repairs that same afternoon. So I bought a silly car, but it was a Toyota, so reliable, fun to drive, and most importantly, pop-up lights. But it gets worse. That T-bar roof, awesome, but it leaked, and in the winter it would freeze as it warmed up, so it would actually start raining inside the car. This led to a very annoyed colleague. It was freezing cold and we were driving to an event. She'd just had her hair done, and by the time we were halfway there it was pouring down inside the car. We arrived at this thing looking like drowned rats. Also, I mentioned the massive exhaust, right? This thing was loud. At the time I was working in Eastbourne and I used to park up in a multi-storey car park every day. You know, the older ones with a man on the gate. That guy on the gate absolutely hated me because that exhaust would echo throughout the whole building. To avoid making him even angrier, I'd always creep round the car park, not touching the accelerator to be as quiet as I could. One day I was leaving work and as usual creeping down through the levels, not touching the gas. The car pulls up quite fast behind me and as I turned to go down to the lower level, I was thinking he must be a little bit annoyed that I'm going so slow, so I blipped the throttle with a good loud rumble just to say, hey, I'm going slow because this thing is loud. We get to go down the next ramp and... what a dickhead. I figure I'll pull over, I'll let him pass and I'll give him the special one finger salute as he passes me. I check around and it's just me now. I go to pull out of the space that I just pulled into and as I turn right, It was me. The horn was sounding every time the steering wheel turned right, and it was getting worse now because it wasn't stopping. The guy downstairs already hated me and my car. Now I'm stuck in his car park beeping like some sort of knob. I know what, I'll pull the fuse, at least that will shut it up until I get home. Well, the fuse box diagram was in Japanese, and that's when I realised I had an import. Eventually I found the right one, got it out, and I made a swift exit. Now, the fact that this was happening when turning the steering wheel would turn out to be a valuable lesson. Unfortunately, that lesson would be lost on me. On the way home, I reached some traffic lights. It was a wide, quiet, flat stretch of road, and as I often did at a red light, I decided I was going to give it some beans as soon as those lights turned green. So, into first, foot down hard, release the clutch, and the car pulls off fast. But my steering wheel came off in my hands. But the vibrations from that stupid exhaust must have worked the screws from my cheap Ripspeed steering wheel loose. Thinking as fast as I could, I chucked the steering wheel into the passenger seat, grabbed hold of the steering boss and pulled into the first lay-by I could. My car had just tried to kill me, and now I'm sat at the side of the road fishing for tiny screws out of the carpet and trying to reattach it as best I could to get me home. I noticed at the time the two cables for the horn were hanging out too, which possibly explains my beepy turns earlier that day. After that, we'd get hold of a standard steering wheel from a Breakers, fitted it, and that was the last of my steering problems. Although I recall the car continued to be troubled in various different ways until I eventually sold it. That was definitely my worst car, but in some ways one of my favourites. It's a time I remember fondly. I loved constantly changing sheet bangers and the challenges that came with them. But not all of my car purchases were total disasters, so let's talk about 3 of my best car purchases. If you're enjoying this video so far, please do like, subscribe, and let me know what your worst car was in the comments below. I will reply to every one. So in at number 3 is this, my E34 BMW 520, and it was great. It was fun to drive, had loads of history, and that classic BMW square shape. It was a proper beamer. I only had one small problem with that car. A teeny tiny fire broke out under the back seat. I fixed it with a fuse, and even though a fire sounds like a bad thing, when you've owned as many disaster cars as I have, that barely makes the list. What's more, a year later, the previous owner wrote me a letter asking me to buy it back for more than I paid for it. Now, of course, I checked for a hidden stash of cash and found nothing. He just loved the car, and honestly, so did I. I wish I'd kept it. All in, I actually had pretty good luck with BMWs. The E34 and E36, a couple of E39s, an E46, and now the E91 I'm building. Let's hope that one becomes a favourite too. My choice for the second best car I've owned is without a doubt the most basic, slowest, simplest car with the least street cred in my car history. But to me it was special. Really special. P191 SOO, a Mark IV Fiesta 1.3 LX in a purpley blue colour. It didn't have body colour bumpers, no electric windows, no power steering, no CD player, no alloys. It was about as basic as it could get, but it was my first car, and more than that, it was left to me by my granddad. Grandad was a man who inspired my love of cars. He's quite possibly the reason I'm sat in front of this camera today talking about cars to you guys. Grandad was a mechanic, a great man and a car enthusiast. I've heard so many stories of the cars he's bought and built, and I have a bunch of stories of my own. He bought me my first model car back from a holiday with my nan when I was little. I remember it was an Italian Porsche 911 with police livery, and it started my obsession with model cars. My pocket money would be saved and used to buy a new model car whenever I could. I used to love going up to the garage where he worked, and that smell of oil and petrol even now sends me back to that time. Sadly, he passed before I could drive, and I'm sure with him around I would have made a lot better purchasing decisions, but he left me his Ford Fiesta, and for me that car meant freedom. It meant independence and a connection to my granddad. People who aren't car guys probably won't get this, but a car is so much more than metal, plastic and mechanical stuff. It's feelings, emotions and character, way beyond being just a means of getting from A to B. The moment I could, I slapped L plates on that car and I went out in it. When I passed my test, it was my ticket to freedom and getting out and about with my friends. Now that car may have been nothing special on the face of it, but to me it was one of the most special cars I will ever own. And when the time came for me to get another car, I gave it to my dad, so it stayed in the family a little while longer. Now during my ownership, I did make some bad decisions and I made some truly awful Halfords and max power spec mods, but it got me tinkering and further strengthened my love of cars and driving to this day. Now this last car, I couldn't not put it in the top position. I loved it so much I bought it twice. My 1992 Toyota Celica GT in black. I bought it from an auction as an insurance seized car for just £200. It looked honest, but it had no MOT. Now in the UK, you can't drive on the road without a valid roadworthiness certificate or MOT, unless it was on its way to an MOT appointment. Well, between where the car was and where I live, there was an MOT test centre, so I booked it in. I thought, I'll get an idea of what it's going to fail on and avoid having to pay to transport it home. But unbelievably, it passed. And from that point, I had around 2 years of completely trouble-free motoring with that car. I modified it with bigger alloys, I gave it a bigger, although not MR2 big, exhaust, and I upgraded it with GT4 wings. Now that last one was partly due to an unscheduled meeting with a tree, but we won't go there. I joined car clubs, I started going to car meets, trading parts and meeting great people. It was my first proper introduction to the car community and I loved it. What's more, it was the first car I'd done bodywork on, the first car I've made performance mods to, and the first car that got me meeting cool people around the country, and it cost just £200. Finally, a Toyota with pop-up lights that I could actually enjoy without fearing for my life. After 2 years of trouble-free motoring, I sold it once, bought it back after the Frontera fiasco, and sold it again a little while later for £1,200. I missed that car, but let's be honest, I bought it cheap, I loved it, I worked on it, and I sold it for a healthy profit. What more can you ask for in your perfect car? So what have I learned from owning over 28 cars and motorbikes? My first lesson would be that if someone who knows cars says don't buy something, or they offer to check a car over for you, listen to them. £500 cars are often cheap for a reason. They can be great, but look out for the red flags and don't let the excitement of getting a new car override the obvious warning signs. You can normally tell if a car's been loved or abused, maintained or ignored, or if it's got a shady past. But the biggest lesson for me is that sometimes the best cars aren't about spec, speed or comfort. They're about connection and joy. I've had newer, nicer, faster cars than all of the ones I've mentioned today. The Audi S5, a couple of Mazda RX-8s, even a Subaru Impreza, which was a bucket list car for me. But sometimes it's the stories that come with the cars that actually make them your favourites. And lastly, the sensible choice isn't always the best either. I had a nearly new Citroen C4 diesel, a small, sensible car that was safe, reliable and great on fuel. And I utterly hated it. To me it was an appliance, it wasn't a car, and it really didn't last long. And that brings me on to why I chose the BMW E91. In many ways it ticked all of my boxes. I like BMWs, I can tinker with it, it's practical, and it has project potential without being too boring. I'm currently documenting my E91 build from purchase to fully upgraded daily. Subscribe to follow the journey and drop a comment which car disaster would you want the full story on. Also, which car do you think I should try and hunt down and buy back someday? Join me next time on the E91 project where we're refurbishing those alloy wheels. I'm partway through that right now, but it's pissing down outside and I thought I'll step in, dry off and record this video instead. So thanks for watching.